We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
The National Rifle Association is once again staring down the barrel of the US Supreme Court, but not necessarily for the amendment you might presume. We're back with Liberty Nation's special Talking Liberty segment where we detail the biggest cases of the day and how they impact your liberty. Now, to guide us through the morass that is the American legal system, we're joined by legal affairs editor, host of the Uprising podcast, and legal mind extraordinaire, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire. Welcome back to the show, Scott.
Thank you, as always, Mark. A pleasure to be here.
Of course, naturally it is. Naturally, the only person who gets on my Talking Liberty segment. Now, tell me, Scott, the NRA, the Supreme Court, and not, I repeat, not a Second Amendment case. Surely
That's
the
right.
World has gone bizarre.
You said not necessarily in your introduction, and I thought, gee, it's not that it's not necessarily. It's definitely not the amendment that people are thinking about. This is not a gun case at all. This is a First Amendment case, and it has the potential to be a very important one. What this is about is, I think that we've talked over the term for a number of occasions about the Letitia James assault on the NRA.
General,
this is the former New York attorney, or excuse me, maybe that was wishful thinking on my part. Not former. I think she's still the current attorney general of this great state of New York. And she tried to cancel the NRA by having a judge declare the entire organization to be basically canceled because the NRA was chartered in New York, and it is a nonprofit sort of charitable organization. That state's courts have the ability to govern it, and that state's attorney general presumably has the ability to direct some of that governance. And that's what that case was about. It was part of a full court press to attack the NRA on all fronts, leading from Governor Cuomo on down throughout the entire state. And one of those fronts, Mark, was undertaken by this woman named Vullo, Vullo, who was the director of the New York State Department of Financial Services. And what she did was basically said to the NRA's marketing partners, who were some insurance companies, that they had better not do business with the NRA if they knew it was good for them. So this is a First Amendment case. It's about whether or not the NRA's First Amendment rights are violated if the state government acts against them because of the expression of those rights. So what the NRA alleges is if they were just interested in I'm struggling here. If they were an advocacy organization that argued for better dental hygiene for Americans, for instance, that the New York State government would not have attacked their marketing partners, in this case through the insurance industry, but because they were involved in speech that they didn't like, namely advocacy for less gun regulation and fewer gun regulations, that it was an attack on their free speech, and they should suffer the consequences for that attack, meaning New York State should have to pay up to the NRA for this violation.
Well, I think a couple of things to point out. Number one is it's not just a question of paying up, although I believe under the leadership of Mr. Wayne LaPierre, finances could do with a little boost. But it's about stopping the New York State government and indeed other state governments and potentially even federal governments from infringing upon First Amendment rights. So that there's an expansion out of this, right? If it goes in favor of the NRA.
You are 1,000% right, and that's why we're talking about it. It's not about the check that the New York State Department of Financial Services may have to cut to the NRA.
I think you mispronounced that, Scott. If we could just edit that. I think you mean that the New York taxpayer.
Yes, well, that's exactly right. It's always important to reference that, I think, and thank you for it. These things aren't, even though Ms. Vullo is being sued in her personal capacity as well under the lawsuit, I suspect that she won't be the one paying, but it will be the taxpayers. And that is why we're talking about it, because this is really a huge area of the law, this kind of viewpoint-based discrimination against people that doesn't attack their free speech rights directly. In other words, it's not they didn't seize the publisher of the NRA magazine and say you can't publish an opinion, that is contrary to what we think about gun rights. It's this oblique attack against their, again, this is a financial issue, right?
Yeah.
But as you say, if the NRA wins this case, Mark, it is so very big. It is such a very big deal that the courts are letting companies and then presumably individuals hold these regulators and administrators accountable for this kind of non-direct attack on the First Amendment. And I think that, the NRA is a real victim here. They've been a victim of Letitia James, and really, of course, just like the taxpayers get it for if the state is found liable, the NRA members are the ones that get it, right? In other words, I took up your criticism of Wayne LaPierre, which I think, I've criticized openly on this program before for his financial malfeasance, but the attacks against the First Amendment rights of the people who make up the NRA and its members. That's really what it's about. And their rights are being attacked and have been attacked, not just by New York bureaucrats, but others as well. So it's wide reaching if it goes.
Well, I think that this particular topic, Scott, this case here, I do want to get to your predictions on the path of this, not necessarily the outcome. But I think people who are hearing about this, I mean, I certainly did. I had almost a mind comparison flashbulb go off in my head, thinking about the recent Twitter files and how the government wasn't directly stamping down on people speaking their mind through the Twitter medium, but there was pressure applied to the companies and, of course, to sponsors of the people who pay sponsorship, promoted material fees to Twitter, in terms of
why bother shutting down the speaker when you can just turn off their microphone, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I presume somebody somewhere is going to make the connection between the NRA case and the notorious Twitter files. Maybe that person was just me, and I'll be on all the talking circuits for my amazing computer brain. But let's talk about where you think this is going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So this case is currently it went up through the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a New York. That's the circuit that hears all appeals from the New York area, from the state. And the NRA basically has lost until now, and they're appealing to the United States Supreme Court, which is why we're talking about it now, Mark, because in its most recent announcements from orders from the bench, the Supreme Court has allowed the NRA to submit their petition under seal. Now, I don't know why they have asked. So you have to ask for permission. So basically what the NRA does is they
certiorari, is it?
Yes, their petition for certiorari and an appendix filed under seal. They asked for permission, and in the most recent sitting of the Supreme Court, they were granted permission to file this under seal. I've asked the attorneys for the case why they asked for permission to file under seal, and I haven't yet got a substantive response to that question. But perhaps it has to do with the financial dealings that they want to keep. They want to say, they injured our finances, but they don't want to say to what extent. As we've talked about, Wayne's under a lot of scrutiny now with respect to financial dealings, so perhaps that's it. But we do know that the Supreme Court granted that request, and it seems like that request may be granted with justices paying attention to the case and may likely give it cert. So if the case is denied cert, as we say, and the Supreme Court doesn't want to review the Second Circuit's decision, well, then it's a nothing burger. But if they take it, it's far more consequential, and I suspect we will be seeing many headlines about this case if that happens, because all of the regulators will be joining the court or trying to, as amicus or friends of the court, to write about how they should definitely not give the NRA damages in this case, because all these regulators are scared that their craven acts against political enemies will be held against them, I'm sure.
And of course, cowardice is always the way to manage the laws of your land. And we'll continue talking with Scott D. Casenta, discovering why prayer at a prayer vigil is a surprise to some folks. After this break, don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five, produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone, hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner, joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors, deconstructing leftist narratives, debating the hot topics, and remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative Five.